Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. So today I've been asked quite a bit by a lot of people just how I do my edges on my chrome tan leather and also on my veg tan. Saw the list here. I'll kind of leave a description down below as well too, so where you can get the stuff, how everything's spelt. Most of the supplies that I kind of got have been either from District Leather Supply or Rocky Mountain Leather Supply. Both great companies, a lot of great choices, some oddball stuff, a little bit different than Tandy's. I love Tandy's as well, and Springfield Leather. But these guys here kind of carry a little bit of unique stuff. Some from Japan, and then a couple other locations as well. Some great tannery stuff, but not here to promote them. But that's just kind of where this is where I found the Tokonole Burnishing Agent. Growing up, and then also here of late, everybody's pretty big on either using water or the gum track to kind of burnish out the edges and stuff, and which works great. But the Tokonole, I don't know what it's exactly made with, but this stuff, I mean, all you do is actually put it on the leather on the edges, and it becomes almost immediately burnished. It kind of goes in, smooths the edges. You don't have to sit there and rub hard. You really can't use your burnishing machine, your burnishing wheel on there, because it'll actually burn it too hard. The biggest thing you can do is actually just use a cloth, piece of denim. Doesn't have to be anything even coarse, to tell you the truth. So I've had really good luck with some straight white canvas cloth, as you see here. The big key though to no matter what you're going to burnish your edges with is sanding. Sanding is the #1 key to getting straight flat edges. As you saw, I started kind of off with the spindle grinder. The spindle grinder that I have, I bought it on Amazon not too long ago. Something I never really kind of needed, but getting back into leather work, I found that it's actually a lot easier to smooth the edges off with the hardware, or the leather rather, with the spindle grinder versus kind of doing it by hand. And but what I've done that was a little bit different, because I got tired of swapping out the wheels, because you can only get those things in one size grits, was that I actually took 2 grit wheels, cut them in half, and I put the 80 grit on the bottom and the 240 grit on top, to make it one wheel, so that way I can start off with the heavier grit to remove the excess of material, and then I could just slide it right up and hit the 240 grit versus having to stop, swap out the spindles, put the new spindle back on, and so forth. So looking for one more grit size, like a 360 or 320, to kind of make it a 3-ringer to go on there, so I can work all 3 grits at the same time. I'll let you know if I can find any of that right now. I haven't seen any 320 grit, mainly like 80, 240, 120. And 120 to 80 is really not a big difference when we're dealing with the leather. But again, 80 grit sometimes can be a little too much as well. So you just want to kind of go through it and maybe just use 240 on there. So what you see me doing here, and again, I apologize kind of for the voiceover. I didn't have my mic on my DSLR when I was doing this. So I'm kind of doing the voiceover effect, but I think I can kind of explain things a little bit better, a little bit cleaner on the microphone anyways. But obviously I just applied the Tokonole to the edges here. I'm kind of stroking through. Again, same thing with sanding and also burnishing. You always want to apply it in one direction or the other. Once you kind of got the edges laid down on itself, you can kind of go back and forth. But if you're making like a small minimalist wallet or anything else that has the other portions of the component together, you really gotta be careful rubbing back the other way, otherwise you'll end up flipping your edge. Now, the other big key to having good burnished edges is you've got to glue your pieces together. A lot of people will just stitch together, either hand stitch, machine stitch. They'll hole punch, they'll use their other punch devices to kind of go through, but you've got to glue the edges. People tend to think that when you start burnishing the edges that they actually kind of form together like you're welding them, like a 2 pieces of metal. It doesn't work that way. You will end up with a nice finish, but over time what happens is the leather will start separating and you won't have a nice finished edge anymore, and then eventually you'll end up having a ruined piece of leathercraft. So make sure that you do glue your edges. It doesn't have to be a major part, but some really good strong cement to kind of get through it. Chrome tanned, oil leather tanned, anything that's not strictly veg tanned, you need to make sure that you scrape away the tanning process away from that, so that way you ensure that you have a good solid bond between the hide side and the flesh side. If you don't, it's not going to stick. you can literally put cement right on top of the veg tan, and after it cures, it'll peel right off. So you've got to kind of get your X-Acto knife, head knife, whatever it may be, and actually scrape those edges away. So again, so starting around the video, I get my Tokonole for the burnishing agent. This here is the Uniters. It's primer. This is what I lay down after I've already burnished the edges. It works really well. It'll actually go in on any of the grooves, because a lot of times you're not going to get an exact perfect finish sanding wise, especially with chrome tan, because sometimes the edges will roll on itself. And that's actually where I was about to go on this last part, but that primer will actually go in and fill in some of those gaps. And also it actually helps from the edge paint absorbing into a lot of the leather as well too. So the primer, from what I've found, actually kind of is a more of a like a latex, so to speak. It actually adheres to the leather really nicely and creates a nice bond, and then gives you a nice final finish on there after you come back with some 1000 grit or 500 grit to kind of just rough the edges up a little bit. And then I come back with I've been using Vernis edge paint and also Uniters edge paint as well. They're both heatable. So what that means is once it applies and dries, it kind of dries it to a flat finish, but you can apply heat either through a salting iron, any kind of a heat device itself, and it will kind of help bring back some sheen to the edge. And later on, what you'll see also as well, which is a nice little finish, because not so much with chrome tan or veg tan or oil tan, but with veg tan, I'll come back and actually spray Resin on top of the surface, which also brings back a nice little gloss finish to these edges. And I think I've got a couple close-ups on here that'll show you how it dries. It kind of gives you that, more of a satin type, flat, dull finish on the edges, which in most cases, depending on what you're making, it's okay. Not everybody looks at the edges. I don't know how many times, before I got into leatherwork pretty heavy, do you really kind of look at the edge of the devices itself. You're always looking at the front, backs, and the sides and the bottoms, but do you really see the edges and how they're really finished? But supposedly Vernis is used by a lot of the high-end designers, purse companies, like Gucci and I can't even think of half what those guys are called right this second. But anyway, some of those guys will sit there at Louis Vuitton and Michael Kors. Those guys, they'll actually come back in and finish up with their edges with using Vernis. So again, give either one a shot. Again, not promoting these two here, but this ones that I use. I've had good results with these guys. And again, it's just practice, kind of going through, practice on a couple of scrap pieces. And then I use, apply both the edge primer and the edge paint with the roller pin that you see down there on the blue roller pin. That seems to work out really, really nice as well too. I've seen guys apply them with scribes. They'll sit there and get a long needle, dip their needle into it, and apply it. That applies nicely as well too. The roller pin here is actually a lot quicker, and you can kind of go back and forth a little bit. It's got some grooved edges on there. And you can see I use it quite a bit. It's got some old paint on it that never got cleaned off, but it cleans up really nicely as well too. So, and it's not necessary to have to sit there and dip it into any kind of a solvent or water-based. And I believe that the Vernis, both the edge paint primer and the Uniters stuff is all water-based. I don't believe it's oil-based, because it usually wipes off really nice and it dissolves in water pretty well. I've tried to do some research and maybe just didn't do it well enough, but I couldn't tell if it was oil-based or water-based. But I'm thinking it's a water-based product. So I'll let you kind of finish up here. We'll close out with showing you kind of the final product, what everything kind of looks like with some of the edge paint. But again, you guys got any questions, any comments, please leave them down below. I'll share this, and I've got a couple other videos too of what how I end up doing the spindle grinder and what I do with that. So again, if you guys got any really cool ideas that you want to share to the leather community, feel free to reach out and we'll get them shared. Thanks a lot, and catch you on the next time.